You're listening to the Courage Hotline podcast. I'm your host, Candace Doby, leadership development strategist, courage coach, speaker, and author. And on this show, I take real questions from professionals who are stuck in a swirl of fear, doubt, and hesitation. Then I give them candid, coded advice and practical strategies to help them check their fear, conjure their courage, and tackle their peskiest professional problems. Whether you're navigating workplace politics, speaking up in high-stakes meetings, or just trying to bet on yourself, you're in the right place. We're back with another episode of the Courage Hotline podcast, and we're about to get into our next question. Here we go.
I would like to know when a company, for example, hires a wonderful speaker like you to speak to the disparities in the workplace, when does that presentation become a practice for the company? I mean, you explore very wonderful and hard topics, and I appreciate them very much, but I wonder, since you're not the actual company, and at the end of the meeting where all the attendees were going, what an amazing speaker, and then it's back to work and back to the status quo for the company. Is there actually room for courage in the companies you present to, or are they encouraging us to all quit because nothing is actually going to change after all these feelings and courage is brought to the surface through your presentation? That's my question.
Phew. Okay, let's talk about it, because I think what you are naming is what professionals who have been a part of these presentations have maybe felt internally but haven't expressed. And, that's really about that. Yeah, the speaker was good. The message was clear. And everybody's fired up to take action. But then what happens is the next day comes along and emails are being circulated as normal. It's back to business as usual on that next Monday morning. So I want to say that I get it. I understand what you're coming from. And so what I want to provide for you is a pretty honest answer to your question. And that is that a keynote is something that is valuable, it is impactful, and a keynote alone is not going to change an organization. A keynote is the first step. It is the strategic spark that will allow people in the room that work at an organization to think differently. A keynote is really designed to shift perspective. It's designed to change the way in which you think about something that you have in the past been thinking about one way, but now we're going to open up space for you to think about that differently. That is what a keynote is very good at accomplishing and doing. And that is important because the first part of change is to challenge business as usual, to challenge the way in which things have been done. That's the first thing that we have to do to even step foot on the path of change. And that's what a keynote does. But let's be real, okay? 45 minutes shifting perspective, engendering excitement, like these are all important things. And for change to happen, for transformation to happen, it cannot stop at the keynote, which is why many of the organizations that I work with, we open up with a keynote to open up space, again, for people to think differently, but then we have to do something more with that. And that's where we start doing trainings. That's where we start doing residencies, group coaching, individual coaching, executive coaching, so that people inside of the organizations can not only be inspired by the content, inspired by the what if or what could things look like, but we start practicing them. We start breaking down the tools and the strategies and approaches, and, professionals have an opportunity to personalize the strategies, try them out, get information, fail, and use information to try again, because that's where the change happens. It happens in trying, in getting information, using that information to move forward. And this is when a message can become of movement and when there can be real company growth, because that is what leaders at the top of companies want. They want growth, but they might not want the way to growth. That can be very uncomfortable. Listen, if we're talking about organizational growth, we're talking about organizations or the leaders of organizations wanting better performance, more innovation, more creativity, and collaboration. And in order for those things to happen, we need courageous leadership at the center of those initiatives, of that movement. And if we need courageous leaders, if we want courageous leaders, then we need people who are going to take risks. We need people who are going to courageously communicate, who are going to try new things, who are going to challenge the status quo and challenge mediocrity. And that isn't easy to do. And I think we've seen that in the news. I think we've seen stories, we've read stories, we've heard stories of leaders of companies, CEOs of companies, executive leadership having a hard time leading courageously in this moment. We can take the CEO of Target, who made a decision to roll back commitments on equity inside of Target or stores and inside the Target organization or corporation. And that was an intentional shift. That was, an intentional decision that was made. And, many people can look at different sides of it, but what some people see is a lack of willingness to take worthwhile risks. And so I just want to acknowledge and answer your question straight out and say, a keynote is designed to shift perspective. And in order for transformation to happen, we have to keep the conversation going with training, with residencies, with coaching, with, opportunities for people to try out the tools and techniques, fail, learn, or have successes and learn and move forward. The other thing that I hear you asking in your question is really about the pace of change. It's really about, had this presentation, we talked about these new ideas, why isn't the change happening? And so I just want to pause for a moment and talk about the pace of change. And let's just look at the history of change. Things can change slowly, even if we look inside of our institutions, our companies, or if we look at the institutions that this country is built on. Change can occur at a slower pace than what we want that pace to be. And so if we get, super focused on looking at whether external change is happening, which is what we all want, but if that becomes the only metric, then we are creating space for us to want to easily give up. And what I want to suggest or look at that is not as, easy to look at or as, noticeable, I guess, is to look at what kind of change happens internally when we act courageously. So I know we want this massive change, but change really does happen one person at a time. So if we were to take you, for example, what are the courageous actions that you can take? What is the influence that you can have that can potentially cause a ripple effect on your team, in your department, at your organization? So how are you speaking up? Or stepping up, into new positions so that you have greater access to people and projects and have a greater seat at the table? How are you showing up in the most honest, authentic way that inspires the people around you to do the same? So courage is a personal tool. And as a personal tool, we do need to look internally to see what is changing within us when we take courageous action. And here's what's changing. Here's what has the opportunity to change, or we get a greater vantage point into, is that we get to interpret our own emotions when we take courageous action. We get to test the reliability of our skills when we take courageous action. We get to build upon each success, each successful attempt at acting courageously, build on that with taking larger, more significant, more impactful, potentially worthwhile risks in the workplace. So what I don't want to ignore with this question is the internal change that happens when we act courageously. and really the influence that one person can have no matter the level that they are at. And this is why I say, because of your question, courage cannot live at the top. Courage cannot live at the top of an organization. We need it there. And courage has to live all throughout, up and out and in that organization. It needs to live in the middle. It's got to live on the front lines. It's got to live at every single level within an organization. And so this question, just as much as it is about the organization as a whole, I would argue that it's also a question about our own influence and our own ability to act courageously and how we can influence the people around us just by looking at us to model the courageous leadership that you are exhibiting. So that's my answer. It's not a perfect answer, but hopefully it gives you a little bit more insight into our personal responsibility to act courageously. I often say, and I'll end with this, is that when courage shows up in the workplace, it is two-faced. And what that means is that there are two equally important sides to courage. There is that responsibility at the organizational level, which you are talking about, those top leaders at an organization. It is their responsibility to make sure that the culture that is being created is one in which toxicity is removed. We can move forward. It is one of progression and equity. And so that is their responsibility, to enact policies and practices that move in that direction. And then there is this other side of courage, which is personal. And that is the part that I want you to think more about as you hear me giving you this answer, is you have personal power and agency and potential and purpose. And that needs to come up and out through your own courageous actions. So there's that. And I hope this answer has been helpful. Again, change can be slow, and that's okay. The thing, though, is change happening? Externally or internally, is change happening? And when we focus on the internal, or at least look at the internal, then we know that absolutely change is happening. Want to take up more space at work without second-guessing yourself? Join the Risk Fitness Club, my private community for ambitious professionals like you who are ready to speak up, step up, and show up courageously every single day. We're talking live workshops, expert-led trainings, and a crew that roots for you and your bold moves. Head to CandaceDoby.com to learn more and get on the list. Want to be more confident speaking up at work? Start by taking one intentional risk a day. That's what the Risk a Day Challenge is all about. 21 days, 21 risks to help you build the habit of courageous action. No fluff, just movement. If you're ready to train your courage like a muscle, head to CandaceDoby.com and check out the challenge. That's it for today's call on the Courage Hotline podcast. If you got something out of this episode, then be sure to share it with a friend or a colleague who could use a boost of courage. And if you've got your own professional challenge that you want me to weigh in on, visit CandaceDoby.com and leave me a message. The Courage Hotline is written by Candace Doby, produced by Karam Pimpale, music by Lamar Shirley, and production assistance from Monica Dulay.